Hello to our viewers and listeners all around the world. This is Maayan Hoffman, Executive Editor of ILTV, and I'm very excited to welcome you to this exclusive interview with Knesset member Sharren Haskel. Sharren has been a member of Knesset for the last 9 years, since 2015. While currently she doesn't hold a ministership, she is considered by many the Minister of Hasbara, very well known in at least 5 continents around the world. Welcome.
Thanks, man. Thanks for hosting me, and hi to all the listeners and the viewers. It's a pleasure to be here.
And it's such a pleasure to have you and to be able to speak about so many of the issues that are going on today. It is such a busy time in the news. Most recently, we can't start out a program, obviously, without the most recent news, which was the assassination of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar, who was killed over the weekend, over the holiday, from an Israeli operation that was actually performed by a young 19-year-old soldier, Miracle.
Who just finished their training and went in with a lot of motivation to try and bring their friends back home, the hostages. And it's incredible to see how that younger Israeli generation has so much love and motivation to defend and protect their people and their family members. And they're very, very sharp, and it's incredible.
It's really one of these incredible stories, that I think is going to become part of the folklore of Israeli society, to talk about how we actually managed to take out this leader. But of course, that is going to shift the dynamics in Gaza. And I'm wondering, what are your thoughts in terms of who is going to ultimately take over? Will this mean the release of the hostages? Where do we go from here?
So I think the first step that we need to understand is that there will not be the day after before the 101 family members of us, of Israelis. These are babies and sisters and brothers and grandparents and uncles who will be returned home, who will be back in the loving arms of their families. And our mission will not be completed until we reach to them and bring them back safe. And I hope it comes really soon.
Do you think the assassination can help with that?
Absolutely. I mean, Yahya Sinwar was very militant, very aggressive, and I think it's an opportunity. We've seen now images of many of the Hamas fighters surrendering up in the north of Gaza, coming out, and it's really good news. And you know what? I think that the Israeli government need to put a reward that for every Israeli hostage that they'll bring back, something like give them 1 million shekel to whoever that bring them back alive.
I saw that the former CEO of SodaStream was offering such a reward.
Yeah, and I think that the government needs to push that. And once we finish that, then we can look on the day after. Okay. And I think that the vision has to be, how can we live side by side? And for that, it's not just the Israeli, perspective and very long history and way of work needs to completely shift and change, but also the international community. And they need to understand that until now, the international community through UNRWA provided the governmental services that any citizen in the world receive from their own government, like education and healthcare and housing and water and sewage. And UNRWA even provide, the street sweepers to clean the streets. And those governmental services are being provided by an international organization.
That's actually linked to terrorism.
Absolutely, and funded by them. Now, the thing is that throughout the years, they let Hamas take over this organization, manage it, and run it, which mean that they use it for their own purposes. They are still using United Nations facilities as military bases, hiding schools and clinics, weapons. Even the hostages were held in UNRWA teachers' homes and doctors. And so you understand that this is an organization that is rotten to its core. But it also provides us an opportunity to create something parallel that doesn't have the footprint of that corruption and radical Islamism that comes with usually Palestinians organizations.
But who takes over? I mean, when UNRWA would maybe, let's say, be moved out, and I read a very interesting report over the weekend in Israel Hayom about some conclusive evidence linking UNRWA to Hamas. We've talked about it many times. It took until the summer for us to name UNRWA a terrorist organization, but the rest of the world hasn't done so. So how do you have a vision for what will happen?
So I when I go to parliaments all around the world and I speak about their vision, suddenly the eyes are opening and the ears are listening. And it's because the Israeli government has never put forward a plan that's going to contradict or replace UNRWA or shut down UNRWA or show to the world how for years and years and years Hamas has been operating through this organization. When 9 years ago, when I just entered the Knesset, I formed the lobby to reform UNRWA because I understood that this organization is one of the key points in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And without resolving it, there's not going to be a different future, not for Israelis and not for Palestinians. So one of my major issues was in front of the Defense Ministry and the Foreign Ministry, which did not want to change it. They said, no, UNRWA is vital. I understand that an organization that provides governmental services like UNRWA, is necessary there because the Palestinian leadership doesn't want this responsibility.
And they probably aren't capable at this stage. I
Absolutely.
mean, look at the Palestinian Authority.
Absolutely. So what we can do is create sort of an international board of directors, okay, from, for example, countries from the Abraham Accords, okay, together with some of the European countries and obviously the Americans who were the biggest contributor and donors to UNRWA. Okay, and they're going to create the same services, the same facilities and the same funding, but they're going to manage it and they're going to have responsibility for it. And with that, there needs to be an adaptation, of a completely different education system because the Palestinian education system is a radical Islamist education system that teaches them hatred and racism and violence. And from that, they are capable of recruiting new terrorists every generation and every generation. And if we want to change our future, it has to start with education. And what was incredible with the Abraham Accords is, for example, that the Emirati education system and the Moroccan one and the Saudis one have changed the curriculum to open the possibility of living side by side, taking out the anti-Semitism and those kind of messages. And I believe that through that, the international community needs to do what it's doing now, fund, but also manage and take accountability for this organization that will provide governmental services.
How long does all of this take?
So it depends how hard we are going to work together. If people are still holding back, those ideas that UNRWA is irreplaceable and the Palestinian Authority, it will take years. But if we work together, understanding on how we need to resolve the problem and build a different future, I believe we can do that within a few months.
Wow.
And more than that, I think it's not just that. The neighborhoods around Gaza, okay, and the cities in Gaza, each one of it can have a local council that's going to have the direct link between this international organization that's providing and funding the services and between the local council who are providers for that. And so, and obviously the security needs, Israel needs to be in a security control. And that maybe that in 2-3 generations, there's going to be a Palestinian leadership that will want to look after its people, that will be capable of doing that.
Well, and it's interesting because you've been really going around the world since the start of this war trying to explain to people what is going on with UNRWA and also what is going on in general in the country, what happened on October 7th. Your English is very good. It's clear to anybody who's watching us today. I know you have some history both in Canada, but you also spent about 6 years in Australia sharing about Israel. Tell me a little bit about that and why. I mean, I have many friends from Australia. I've heard it's a very idyllic location. So what would bring you back to all of the stress of Israel when you're there?
Australia is this incredible country. I love it. And I lived there for 6-7 years. I've studied there. And it's funny, if you do have Australians listeners, I actually worked in a vet clinic. My profession is a veterinary nurse, and I've studied in Australia. It's completely different. I volunteered in an organization that's called WIRES. It's an organization that rescues wildlife, treat them, and then release them back into nature. So my house used to look like a zoo with like blue tongues and, you know, all different reptiles and snakes and possums and lorikeets and cockatoos. And, you know, I used to drive around. People don't know even some of the animals that lives in Australia, like a wombat, you know. I tell people and they say, is there an animal like that, you know? So it was a completely different life, and I really loved it. You know, I've been vegetarian since I was 14 years old. I've always loved animals. And I've actually worked in a vet clinic, in an animal hospital in Bondi Junction, where they actually filmed a TV reality show about a veterinarian called Chris Brown. And this show was called Bondi Vet. And I wasn't on many episodes, but I assisted in a few of the surgeries that he did, you know, and so I might be on a few of those
And yet
episodes.
you decide to come and fight for Israel. You know, I mean, I don't know, this clinic is sounding really good given the last year of war.
It's a completely different life. But, you know, my home is here in Israel. And I understood that, and I felt the need to make a conscious decision of where I want my life to be and where I want my kids to grow up, and also understanding what an incredible miracle our country is and how my grandparents, what they've been through to have this home, which is a shelter for our people, and understanding so much more when you live overseas about this little miracle called Israel. And also understanding how much we love this place, and it's ours. It's a place, one of the only places on earth we can be who we are without the need to justify or explain or anything like that. And so I just decided to pack up everything and come back here to Israel. And my original plan was to actually form a wildlife organization similar to the one that I was volunteering in Australia. And the Israeli bureaucracy completely killed me.
But somehow it feels not that dissimilar with, you know, the Knesset, the animals.
Yeah, it's the real zoo, you know. They needed a veterinary nurse at the real zoo here in Israel in the Knesset, and
definitely. But
yeah.
Sharren, really, you have been probably, you know, to every major country since the start of the war. Tell me a little bit about where you've been, how people have received you when you've gone there. Also, what kind of message are you giving?
So I understand that Israel is not just fighting in the battlefield in front of Gaza and through Lebanon and Syria and Iraq and Iran. I mean, our army will be able to defend ourselves. I mean, it's been a tragedy, you know, the loss and the suffering that our people have been through, and it's very painful and it's very difficult, but we will defeat them. We will win. But we also have a few more battlefields that we have to address. One of them is the media and social media. And, you know, with media outlets like Al Jazeera, that's the mouthpiece for the Muslim Brotherhood. They are putting stories who are complete blood libel, lies, complete lies, knowingly. And they are one of the most popular social media network outlet that you have, and it's very difficult to fight it. And for me, I feel with my position, I'm one of the soldiers to fight this fight for Israel. You know, our family members are fighting in the front line, and my job is also to fight those lies in the media and social media, and to go up and tell them about the real Israel. And, you know, when I go to different conferences and to parliaments all around the world, you know, I'm not the regular politician, you know, the gray hair with the tie and everything. I was a veterinary nurse. I worked with animals, you know, I'm a young mom. And it's easy to relate, you know, we're the same. There's no difference. But we have endured so much hardship, and to share that they actually relate to it much better. And I feel like, it's part of my mission to actually do that and to connect their heart to our community, to our people. And so that has been one of my biggest mission since the beginning of the war.
But is it working? I mean, Sharren, you have 3 young kids, as you said. I mean, young kids meaning under the age of 4. And you're traveling all over the world. It's a huge sacrifice. And yet it doesn't ever really feel like we're winning this war. Do you feel like these are smaller wins that are happening one at a time when you go there? Do you think it's worth the time?
So 2 things. This is not a front that me, Sharren Haskel, as a soldier, needs to fight it alone. There has to be a massive operation through the foreign ministry and our media outlets, and everybody has to work together. And it hasn't been working together. And you know, it hasn't been working barely at all. I can tell you it's better than other operations and war that we've had, but still it's not functioning the way I think it should and where it should be. And they could have done a far better work. But for me, yes, I feel like it's one battle at a time. And if I win the heart of 5 parliamentarians in London that weren't aware of what UNRWA does, and I'm now with communication with them, and I'm sending them material once a week, and I show them what's happening, and we create this bond, this is a revolution. We have 5 people who are very well aware. They can call me and ask me questions. In Switzerland, when I went there and speak to 3 parliament members just before Lazzarini came to them to ask to refund again UNRWA, okay, claiming that there's no corruption, that it's not linked to terrorism. You know, I've sent them through my WhatsApp the things. I send them questions that they can ask. I send them proof and evidence. You know, I had a letter of evidence showing how a Hamas commander of Nuseirat sent a letter of thank you to the education director of Nuseirat, thanking him for giving leave, a week leave, paid leave for a teacher for training a week before 7th of October.
Oh my gosh.
So when they go with a letter signed by Hamas, directed towards their educational director of that neighborhood in Nuseirat, showing that your worker gave paid leave for terrorists to train for the 7th of October massacre, it's an explosion in the parliament. How would they reach it otherwise? And they till today did not settle again the funding back to UNRWA. And I'm still in contact with them, and we've been messaging and things like that. So for me, that's a huge win. I mean, I think if there was all the government operation on these issues, it would have looked different, yes. But even if it doesn't function, I have a responsibility as well. If I know I'm capable of doing this, I have to. It's part of an obligation for me.
And who are your partners? You know, I was speaking to some others, you know, about who are the people who are really doing proper Hasbara for us in this war. And the truth is, like, I came up with a few short names. You know, there's the former Knesset member Ruth Wasserman-Lanze, who's quite dynamic and has gone around. There's the former deputy mayor of Jerusalem, Fleur Hassan.
Yeah, they're wonderful.
You know, they're wonderful. They're all women. All women. I think we should point that out.
Yeah.
That are really very good English speakers that are going out. But who else are the partners? Like, who else is out there for you to work with? Or are there groups like the Christians that you work with? Who?
Yeah, so obviously the Christian Allies Caucus that I work very closely. I'm the chairman here in the Knesset. I've, through this organization, there's like, I think 42, probably even more now, sisters, caucuses, 52, sorry, in parliaments all around the world. And so this is a direct contact with chairmen in different parliaments around the world to actually do that. There's just last month I went to Ethiopia. There was a convention there organized by the Christian Allies Caucus with, I think it was, 26 parliament members there were 40 parliament members from 26 different African countries.
Amazing.
Coming to this conference. And I gave them a presentation of an hour about UNRWA. and an hour about the next day, an hour about the strategic challenges that the world has confronting with Iran, and reaching more than 40 parliament members like that from all around Africa and loading them with that information is absolutely incredible. So they've been an incredible partner as well, and there's many different organizations like that, and that are creating an environment for public diplomacy.
God willing, this war will end one day soon with our hostages back and us in a better place. When all is said and done and your daughters have to, look back at the work that you've done, the travel that you've left them so many times, even though you're back very quickly. Yeah. I know you do these very short trips, but, what is it that you want them to take away from watching what you're doing? What do you hope they'll learn?
I do sometimes conferences, and I'll go for like 12 hours. I'll fly in the morning, come back in the evening, just so that they can see me, so I'm not absent in their life. And it's very difficult for me because I feel like I'm missing out on the best part, the beginning of their life. And I need to be. And this guilt is something that I'm carrying with me all the time.
Though in some sense you're building the country they're going to live in.
That's the thing. After the 7th of October, I was shocked to my core. After what I saw and understood and heard, I was just a few days after the massacre in Kfar Aza and in Be'eri, smelling, seeing, hearing. Those smell and sights will never leave me. And there's just in front of the home of Ophir Liebstein, the head of the local council that was murdered by Hamas on the 7th of October. Just in front of where he was, there's a home of parents of twins, and I'm a mother of twins. My twins are 2 years old, and Yael, my eldest one, is 4 years old, just celebrated yesterday. Thank you. And they were about at the same age when that happened, the 7th of October. They were about a year old, and the parents of those twins, who were also about a year old, I think they were 9 months, Hamas went into their home and murdered their mother in front of them, leaving the 2 babies crying. And for hours and hours and hours, those babies were crying next to their dead mother, their murdered mother, in her blood. And Hamas did that to set a trap so that anyone in the neighborhood, and it's a small neighborhood with many homes around, will hear their crying, will come to their rescue, and they will be able to massacre them when they come to rescue those babies. And as Israeli mothers, when we carry those tragedy and those horrifying stories, and I went every few hours to my girls' room to see that they're okay during the nights, and I would sleep with my gun under my pillow, and every noise of a motorcycle or something like that, I'll run to the window and look. And this is our mission, to protect our babies, our children. And as a leader of this country, I have a responsibility to all of these children to make it safer, to make sure that something like that will never, ever, ever happen again. And for that, there's many changes that needs to happen. And obviously, I'm only one. But with God's help, this is going to be my life's mission, to make sure that Israel is safe and secure, and that something like that will just never happen again to any Israeli child.
Oh, amen. But I want to take us back to Gaza for a moment. Because just as you described, any loss of human life, and certainly what they did to us on the 7th of October, it's beyond. There's no words to talk about. I also saw what you saw, and it's unbelievable. On the other hand, even if the numbers are exaggerated, we've killed 40,000 people in Gaza, some of them, at least, innocent civilians. How do we justify those numbers in terms of our retaliation? Is this proportional?
Well, this game or a comparison or obsession about proportionality is being said by people who do not understand a war, who has never fought a war, who has never been tragically affected by it. Look, I was a combat soldier in Magab during the time of the Second Intifada. Okay, with suicide bombers who would go and explode themselves in buses and bars and restaurants. What were we meant to do? Just go to Palestinians' bars and clubs and bomb them? When you talk about proportionality now with the war, what do we need to do to find a Palestinian festival with thousands of people celebrating and start massacring there the Palestinian youth, raping exactly 400 women, find 40 babies and behead those babies? Is that proportionality? No, this is not how a war works. You need to make sure that you are capable of eliminating the threat for something like that to be able to happen again. This is a war against a vile terrorist organization that's hiding behind civilian population, okay, who was elected by that population with a majority. They are hiding behind them. When Israeli troops were guarding the routes of the refugees going from the north to the south from Hamas snipers who were shooting those Palestinians fleeing, do we need proportionality? Let Hamas massacring them? Or did we, as Israelis, defended those routes and eliminated Hamas snipers to defend those Palestinians going through? We have different level of moral standard. Okay, and when we talk about eliminating the threat of a genocide to our people, meaning we have to eliminate this organization, and it's difficult, and this is in a very populated area, and we are trying the best. Is it perfect? No. Look, war is the ugliest thing possible. We know that. We try to avoid it. We try to avoid it at such a high cost. It cost us the 7th of October because we tried to avoid it, knowing what a war means. It's ugly. People are dying on both sides. But Hamas doesn't care. He doesn't care for the life of Israelis, and he doesn't care for the lives of Palestinians. And so it's making it far more difficult to eliminate that threat. Can we go back and say, okay, we'll just leave Hamas there? No. Because it means that in a few months, it's only a matter of time until they'll try to massacre our people again and again, rape our daughters, burn our babies and our grandparents. That's what they'll do.
But Sharren, at the head of all of this is actually Iran. Iran is funding Hamas, is funding Hezbollah, is funding all of these proxies and all around the region that are trying to attack Israel. Mm-hmm. So, there's talk that we're going to attack Iran, that we're going to retaliate for what it did to us recently with the additional 180 missiles targeted at our people. Mm-hmm. Do you believe we're actually going to attack, and do you believe it will be effective? What are we going to do?
I really hope so. We have to. Look, Iran is the main engine force behind this radical Islamist war. I think that many people, the penny didn't drop yet in understanding that we are in the beginning of a third world war. And it's not just the front of Israel and Hamas. This is radical Islam against Western civilization, against nations that cherish and value life and freedom and liberties and women's rights and freedom of religion and freedom of press and all of these values that makes our society that incredible, beautiful and quality of life. This is what they're fighting. This is a cultural and a religious war. And Israel's at the front line.
So if you were prime minister, what would you do? What would the attack look like?
Well, I would make sure that we are destroying the economical engine behind the IRGCs and obviously the nuclear reactors, to make sure that they do not reach nuclear capability. Because try and imagine those missiles, okay, that they sent towards Israel with a nuclear head. What would happen then? They're very close to it.
Israel wouldn't exist.
Iran is not just the enemy of Israel. It's the enemy of the region.
It's the enemy of the Western world.
Absolutely. Look, many people actually don't know, But Hezbollah, obviously being the army, the strongest arm of Iran, this is an army of Iran, are the main they're controlling the illegal drug and weapon route trafficking in Central and South America. What is Iran doing in Central and South America? They have conversion centers all around the world trying to convert people to Islam. Okay, countries that didn't had even a single Muslim resident are now building a Muslim community based on conversion, and they're paying for it. I mean, it's insane. Any intelligence community, respectful one, in any country will tell you those things. And it's as if, the international community is completely ignoring it.
We don't want to face it, maybe, is the issue.
Look, it's going to come. You'll either have to fight them when they're small with less casualty, or you'll have to face them where they already have nuclear capability with, tens of thousands, if not millions of victims. And this is British soldiers who are going to have to fight, American troops, French troops, German troops who are going to have to be sent there. I mean, it's insane. If you understand what's coming in the next few years, if the IRGC's threat is not eliminated, it's mind-blowing. It's terrifying. And this is a war that we cannot lose. This is a war of radical Islam against the free world. That's what it is. And unfortunately, we don't stand together. The international community doesn't stand together. They turn their back. They rather surrender to very loud, violent voices, political voices in their own countries, and it's very sad. I hope that more strong leaders will be elected into, into countries that will be able to secure the borders and the threats. And what you see in Russia, in Ukraine, you see now North Korean soldiers going to the Russian front line. You see China being prepared and ready with its troop. Why? It's because this is a weak international community, a weak that cannot defend and just surrender to the pressure. It cannot handle the pressure. And you see how with the Chinese and the Russian and the North Korean, these are strategic allies to Iran.
Well, Sharren, we're really out of time today, but this has been super eye-opening, and I really appreciate your time and your effort to come here and to share your analysis, to share your story with our viewers all around the world. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Maya, and it was my pleasure.